Hey guys, welcome to Journey of a Joyful Life podcast. We're so excited that you're joining us today. I'm thrilled that my friend Chelsea Floro is here with us. That we're going to talk about foster care, what foster care looks like in America, what foster care looks like overseas, and just have some dialogue about that. So listen in. Hi, here we are at our amazing podcast today. I'm so happy to have you here, Chelsea.
Thanks for having me.
Well, today we're going to talk about foster care and what foster care looks like in America, what foster care looks like overseas, obviously from our own perspectives. So, Chelsea has been a long time foster mom. How long have you
We were foster parents for almost 10 years.
Okay, and now your home is closed, right?
Yes, we had our fifth and final adoption 2 years ago in March, and we closed our home.
Okay, wow. Well, I'm sure that was a lot of kiddos coming in and out during those 10 years.
Yes.
Do you know how many kiddos you had? Around number?
I think there was 14 kids that came in and out.
Okay.
Anywhere from like 2 weeks to our longest one was about 20 months.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is incredible. And all of those, do those kids include your ones that had stayed in?
Yes, those include our adopted children as well, yes.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about your family. You and your husband, did you always want to foster?
No, actually, it started when I was about 23 or 24. I found out that I couldn't have kids anymore. And so it started on we wanted to adopt a child, just one child. It quickly turned into, we're not doing this for us anymore. We are doing it because there are children that need homes. So we started out just fostering basic children. And then as time went on, we started fostering children with special needs, medical needs, teenagers. So our family is made up of, we have 8 children. One chose not to be adopted. She aged out with us, so we are still her parents in every way, just not on paper.
Okay.
Then we adopted a teenager. She is 21 right now.
Okay.
We have 2 biological kids, and then we have 4 more adopted children that still live at home.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. And how do you feel like the mixture of like the ages with your biological kids and your foster kids and your adopted children, like were your biological kids really on board, or did they really have a say? How did that work?
Yeah, actually, so in the beginning they were small, 3 and 5, I think. And so did they really get a say? No, they didn't really understand. But as time went on, every time a child would leave, we would all grieve, and it would be a family decision. Do you guys feel comfortable enough to say yes to another child? And so we would go off them. If they said, yes, we're ready, we would tell the agency, hey, we're ready to take another placement. If they say, no, we need more time, we would just wait a little bit.
Okay, that's awesome. So I know whenever I moved to China, obviously I didn't really have I had no idea that I would do the things that I do now because I went there as a teacher. And when I moved into the foster care system there in China, the things I learned, it kind of shaped how I viewed foster care. And I knew that American foster care was different, obviously, but I didn't really have a lot of insight about American foster care just because I hadn't ever really been exposed to it. And so today I just want to kind of talk about a little bit of the differences between fostering overseas, fostering in America, and what it looks like when a kiddo comes into your home on both sides. So let's just imagine that you are in a place nobody knows about foster care. There's no prior knowledge. And what did you do at the very beginning? Like, why did you, like you said, you wanted to adopt a child and you wanted to grow your family?
Yes.
And so that's obviously, I think, a lot of people's reasons why they want to go into foster care. They want to grow their family. Some people I know, I have a friend, she was not wanting to grow her family. She just wanted to be a foster mom. That's also awesome. But you wanted to grow your family. And what did you have to do at that point to be licensed?
So first we had to go to an information meeting, and we attended that information meeting. They kind of laid it all out for us. We would need to do so many classes, different paperwork, trainings, a lot of paperwork, a lot of trainings, and then a home study. You have to pass the home study. Once we passed the home study, we had to do FBI fingerprinting, background checks. Our house had to be in order. They had to look at our finances to make sure that we were financially responsible without government assistance or without the money that comes from the state. Mm-hmm. And then I think after all of that, we were ready and open to be taking placements.
Awesome. And about how long does that take from start
Man.
to finish?
I want to say it took us about 7 months. We originally set out, we said we're gonna let it take a year because we're not trying to rush the process. But it only took us about 7 months.
Okay, that's great. So that's really incredible. I will tell you that on the side that I was exposed to, and I know it's not like this in every foreign country, but where I lived, basically foster care was only done by believing families, so families who were Christians who were a part of a very small organization in our city that just reached out to the orphanage there and said, you know, we would like to help the orphanage. How can we do that? We'd like to take a child into our home and foster them. And so Chinese families had done that for a few years, quite a few years actually, maybe taken one child. But not really any children with special needs. So maybe a child with a cleft palate or a child with HIV. Some of those kids got to come into foster care. But a Chinese family didn't want to take a child with HIV or something that could be spread because that was really scary to them. So that's kind of when the foreigners stepped in. Whenever there was a child that had HIV, there was a home that was willing to take that child, a foreign family who lived in our city. But nobody really had those kids that have cognitive differences. And so that was really hard. Nobody really understood. Also, the Chinese orphanage didn't really see a purpose to have them outside the orphanage, right? And so for a lot of reasons. But the woman that I came to work with, she really loved children with Down syndrome. That was just like her heart. She loved them so much. And so she also had taken a child with really severe just intellectual disability, kind of like cerebral palsy, but a little bit more severe. And a lot of the kids there weren't correctly labeled with their disability. So you would think whenever you went there, oh, they're going to give me a child that looks like, you know, XYZ. And then it's totally different. But you don't want to send them back to the orphanage. So there's a lot of misconceptions that happened in those times. And that's how actually in our home we got some of our kids, because a Chinese family would think, oh, I'll take this child. This is what they say about it. And they would bring the child, and then they're like, oh, no, sorry, we can't do that. It's too much. And then it would come to our house, which was totally fine. I mean, I loved that. But when I first went there, the woman that I worked with only had all kids with Down syndrome. And so whenever I really wanted to become a foster mom, she said to me, okay, well, we just have to go have a meeting. And so, I mean, I'm just thinking, okay, that's no problem. So we went and had a meeting with this guy who was sort of over the foster care, and he was like, here's the deal. You have to take care of them. You know, don't do any crazy things. A baby can never die in your house. And, you know, you can never adopt them. And I was like, I agree to all of those except for what if I fall in love? And he was like, nope, can't adopt, can't do that. And I was like, pretty sure I know some people that fostered a kid and then adopted them. So like I'm also really bad at rule following. And so I thought there's probably some ways around that. But anyway, I was like, of course, yes. You know, at this point, I just want to get to the kiddo. And literally that night we went home and they were like, okay, well, you're going to get your kid tomorrow. And I was like,
wow.
Oh, okay. That's really, and like no house checks, no anything like that. Right. Yeah. So it was really different to get a kiddo from the orphanage. Right. And so now, if I'm not mistaken, there really aren't orphanages in the United States. Would you say that?
No, I don't believe that there are any kind of orphanages. There are like group home settings. I could be mistaken, but I don't believe there are any orphanages left.
Okay. And I know, like in my experience overseas, I was there, you know, for almost 8 years, and it definitely changed. A lot more kiddos ended up, if they were neurotypical, not having to stay as much in the orphanage, but they would find kind of like group homes for them where a family would be willing to take like a few, let them go to school. And then if the family needed a break, they'd kind of take them back to the orphanage and have a break for a little while, and then they would take them back. Like if it's Chinese holiday and they needed to go culturally and visit their family, well, they wouldn't take the kids with them. They'd take them back to the orphanage. So there were some differences like that, but there were really kind-hearted people that wanted to partner with the orphanage. They did get a government stipend. Our stipend that we had for our kids would go to like our foster care network, and then the foster care network would collectively buy briefs for us, like diapers and wipes and things like that. And it wouldn't be enough to cover what we needed for all of our kids, especially because our kids with disabilities needed briefs much more than a neurotypical kiddo, which is why we raise support money and all that stuff. But at first, they would provide formula. So if I wanted to use a different kind of formula, then I would totally, use our support money to do that, because, it was just a different kind of situation, and especially vitamins and all those things. So that's kind of how we would get a kiddo. And then there were no quote unquote regulations per se as to like how many kids you could have in your house, unless they would come through and do like a sweep of the city. Like today we're going to do a governmental sweep. So that's why we ended up having apartments, and we would have like 6 to 7 kids in an apartment with some IEs, some Chinese ladies. And then we oversaw all of them. And so that if the government were to come in, there's only 6 or 7 in a house, and they were okay with that. So are there regulations for how many kiddos you can foster at a time?
So there are now, and again, I'm in Texas, so I'm sure it's different everywhere.
Right.
But when I first started fostering, I heard of homes having like 15 kids, 13 kids, like it was no problems. And it was, It was a little bit after we started fostering, they became a new rule that it was 6 kids under the age of 18. They do, however, give, exceptions sometimes, but those exceptions come at a cost. You have to have 24-hour awake care, and it can't be a mom or dad, foster mom or dad. It's got to be an outside party. Wow. And so we actually were thinking about doing that with one of our kids' siblings. It didn't end up, CPS didn't think that we were the best fit. They wanted a Spanish-speaking family for him. Gotcha. And so we weren't the best fit. So we didn't end up having to do that. But I do know that there's some stipulations that come with that. And it's a little more rare than just having the 6 kids under 18.
Yes. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
And that includes your biological kids. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's 6 total under 18.
Okay. So eventually China got to the point where if you were going to adopt, like let's say an American family who wasn't fostering in China, but it did apply to us as well. If you wanted to adopt a child, you could not have more than 6 children, including that child that you were going to adopt.
Yes.
So that rule came right at the end of my time there. Because previously, there are families in America who have adopted so many Chinese children into their one family, like 19 kids in their family, but half of them are from, other countries, which is really incredible. But now it's very much more restricted. And obviously now in China, they've completely closed adoptions. But just speaking before that time, before COVID, that's my new BC. Before COVID.
I know.
Because so many
everything is
changed.
Different. Yes.
Yeah. So one thing I know that really has always drawn me to you, Chelsea, is that you love your kids so much, and you really love your foster babies. And it's so hard to know that you're going to love this child and they're probably going to leave.
Yeah.
And people would come and visit me at my house, and they're like, well, how can you have that child sleep in the bed with you or be in your same room and care for them all the time, and then that they're going to leave? And literally the only thoughts I had were, how could I not? Yeah. Which one of these babies deserves not to be loved with my whole entire heart? I cannot imagine, and I think it's just how God wired me. Of course you, but it was something that was really important to me. I wasn't going to take another baby if I didn't think I could just love that baby as much as I loved them all. And so when a baby would have to be removed to go back to the orphanage, which happened a few times, especially at the end, it happened to everyone. But before that, it happened a couple of other times. And I felt so misunderstood. And I know that maybe to some people sounds crazy, but I remember the feeling right now, all these years later, of every single one of those kids and how much I love them. I've never stopped loving them. I don't know what's happened to them. And I lost a lot of babies to death also. And once I learned how to grieve death, I was able to have way more peace with my babies that died versus the ones who didn't die, who I didn't know were safely in heaven with Jesus forever. I don't know, I could just come to some other kind of peace than knowing that this child just went back to the orphanage, or even went into a family situation that was unsafe, which really didn't happen for my kids. But I also grieved whenever they got adopted. not to the point where I didn't want them to get adopted. I was so happy for them, but I loved that child so much. And I would always beat myself up like, why did you love them so much? Why did you get so attached? And I'm like, because I love it. I mean, I would literally all the time have these conversations in my head, like, how can you keep doing this? You're such an idiot. Like, why do you keep letting your heart do this to you?
Right.
And I will never forget one time I had a baby and she was so sick, she was going to die. And they had really cracked down on me having children that died. Yeah, it's so funny because they would give me a child that was on death's door and say, "We'll see if you can make it better." And it's like, well, the baby has Down syndrome and severe heart disease, and you're not going to let me give him surgery. So some of my babies, the Lord healed. I mean, totally healed, and the baby would be fine. But so many times, they would be healed with Jesus. And if I couldn't get them to the hospital fast enough to have them die in the hospital, then I would be in really bad trouble, because then it's speculation. What did you do to cause the death? And so I lived in such fear, especially after the years went on, because the government crackdown was much harder. But this one baby, I had called the foster boss and said, I know that she doesn't have very much more time. I'd already been in the hospital with her for 2 weeks, and I'm going to say it's costing a lot of money. I would have paid all the money in the world, but I knew that she wasn't going to get better. And I just said, I need to know what to do. What do you want me to do? Because either I'm happy to stay with her in the hospital if the orphanage will pay for this, but the hospital doesn't want her here anymore because there's nothing they can do. And he said, oh, well, you're going to have to take her to the orphanage and drop her off. And I was like, oh, no. That really wasn't one of my options. And he was like, well, she can't die with you, Melodie. And you have to take her, and I was just sobbing my eyes out in this hospital. And I had gotten such a reputation at the hospital. They all knew me, and they all knew that, oh, here's this dumb foreigner who always has these babies that she's paying for, and they're like putting me in a corner because they don't want anyone to see. And but secretly, we had such great relationships. I made such sweet friendships with those doctors and nurses. But I literally went from the hospital took a taxi and went to the orphanage, and I was just crying. And I'm just holding her, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, there's nothing else I can do for you, and I know I'm going to see you in heaven one day. But I get to the orphanage, and it's really morbid, and I hand her off, and I'm just a mess. And a woman comes in the door with a 18-month-old baby with Down syndrome, and she goes, don't cry, here you go, and sits her in my lap, this new little child, where I'm just devastated over this baby that's about to die in a bed all by itself. Nobody's going to love her. And here I have this little toddler on my lap that looks up at me like, who the heck are you, woman? And I'm like, I cannot take care of you. How am I going to love you? You little needy child that's going to suck the life out of me, and you hate me. She just looked at me with these eyes like, I don't even want to love you, And everyone always teased me because literally she never liked me. We always had a weird relationship because I'm sure that she had been passed around before she came to the orphanage. You could just tell. But I didn't have anyone to pick me up at the orphanage. Something was going on. I don't know. And I had to take a taxi, and the orphanage was in a really bad part of town. So I had to take a taxi from the orphanage to the airport because the taxi wouldn't take me all the way to where I lived. He would only take me to the airport. So here I have this baby that I had just got dropped off, and all my hospital bags that I'd had carrying for that baby in the hospital for 2 weeks. And I look like, you cannot even imagine. Like, I hadn't had a shower. I mean, I've been sobbing. I get off at the airport in this taxi line where all the other people getting off of flights, and my bag bursts. And all of my hospital stuff goes everywhere. And I just sat down in the middle of the floor, and I'm crying, and I'm holding this baby, of course, foreigner, Chinese baby, all the things, just crying. And I'm like, God, I cannot do this. What have you told me to do? I can't do it. And I'm just crying and crying. And she looked up at me, and I just had this feeling, Melodie, you have to have faith. You have to have faith that I'm going to fulfill what I've called you to do. And I was like, that's going to be your name, Faith. That's what I'm going to call you. And it was. And I just named her Faith right there. And I was like, we're going to have faith together. You're going to have faith to love me, and I'm going to have faith that it's going to all be all right, as I'm grieving this other baby, and just all the crazy feelings that went along with that. But literally, that's like how they would replace one with another. And oftentimes they would do that to me because they would feel, because I was the home that always ended up having the kids with disabilities. And a lot of times there weren't a lot of hope for them. And so they're like, oh, don't cry, Melody. Just let me give you another one. And I'm like, that's not always probably the best thing, But I can't say no because there's a whole orphanage full.
Right.
My heart just can't say no. And so how did you cope when you lost a child? I mean,
and how did I cope? I don't know necessarily.
I mean, you don't have to tell us all the ways
how
you coped,
I cope, but I tell you, to become attached and to become emotionally just love this child is a choice and is not a choice at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's just it's my natural reaction. I'm going to love them, but it's also a choice. In the back of my head, I know, am I going to do this fully, or am I going to hold back a little bit because I know that they're not staying? And so it was a choice as well to say, nope, I'm going to go ahead and fully completely give myself to them, completely love them. And one of our kids especially, he was with us for 20 months, and we really wanted him to go back to mom. We just really believed in mom. There was a time where we asked mom to come live with us if she wanted to. She declined. We just really believed that she was going to be able to get her baby and raise him. And then as time got closer to the final trial, they said, we're terminating mom's rights and he is going to go up for adoption. And so we were like, well, if he's been with us for so long, if he's going to go up for adoption, of course, we would like to adopt him. Mm-hmm. And the day after trial, our hearts are broken for mom, but we're like, okay, we're going to move forward with adoption. And an aunt decided to step up. And so I think it was like a grieving process all over again, is, okay, he should be with his family. We knew that. Like, I knew from day one that this child should be with his family. But it was like, okay, I had even that one day of this, okay, he's going to be my son forever. And having to lose that was devastating. So how do I cope? Time heals. We also that was probably the only time where we waited like 6 months to say yes to another placement. Mm-hmm. Really needed our hearts to heal. We did still have a teenager that was in foster care in our home at the time, so it's not like we were empty. Right. But that I really just needed time. But to pour myself into other things. So there's always, whenever someone left, there was always another child in my home. And so I would just pour myself into those other children that were there. Yeah. So I don't know that you ever, like you said, you still grieve them, you still love them, but it gets easier. And now I've got all these kids that I'm managing with different, medical disabilities and different things, like areas. I got a grandbaby. And so I still think about him often, and I still have that hole in my heart from him, but it's gotten easier,
Yeah, for sure. I think, just having faith and knowing that the Lord can really heal our hearts whenever we feel like it cannot be healed, is something that I'm really grateful for, because sometimes I wouldn't know, like, how are we going to recover from this?
Yes.
How are we going to, and just, I don't know, that quote from Elizabeth Elliot, just do the next thing. I would always just think, okay, well, I just literally have to do what's next. Like, focus on the other child that's in your home.
Yes.
Obviously there were so many other children. And of course, the people around you always say the wrong things unintentionally.
Always. Like, I could never do that. I would never be able to foster because I couldn't get too attached and let them leave. And I'm like, well, I do, and I'm not special. It right. grieves me. Right. I'm not superhuman. It's not like I'm like, oh, bye, see you later. Like, yeah, it is the most painful thing to love a child so much and then watch them leave. And most of the times, you never get to see them again. So you don't know what ends up happening to them.
Yes, it's very true. And I think one of the hard parts about overseas foster care is that, and I don't know if you ever experienced this, that some of my kids would be adopted by like really loving, awesome American families that didn't know the kid at all, right? They knew what was written on a piece of paper or like on a file, which was most of the time incorrect because those files were written by people who wanted the kids to get adopted.
I feel like that's the same in America, though.
Okay.
You know, my son Ricky came to us, and they were like, they called and said, "Oh, we have a little baby boy. He just has a hole in his heart." And so we drove all the way out 6 hours away, and picked him up. And when we saw him, I was like, this does not look like what we thought. And then the doctor started talking to us, and it was a myriad of problems. Of course, he has a feeding tube and a tracheostomy now, but that all started out with he has a hole in his heart.
Wow.
So I think that does happen in America too. I think there's a lot of like, not necessarily all the truth is being told if they do know, or sometimes they withhold like some major things to, you know, get them placed. I think that does happen quite often here.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can definitely see that. But it would be so difficult whenever this family would come, and it happened pretty quickly actually for me. I had only been in Goyang for, I don't even know, like less than 6 months whenever the first little girl got adopted. And I didn't know her very well because I had just been there a short amount of time, but she had Down syndrome and she was precious. And the family that came, but Mariana, the woman that I worked with, had gone back to the Netherlands. And so I had to take her to her adoption day. It was it was really fresh. I was really fresh. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I was like, here I am being the facilitator, bringing this child to meet the parent who had come, and it was a father, because they had a bunch of children, and the mom had to stay back in America, so the dad had come to pick her up. And I just remember leaving that thinking like, that was it. Oh my goodness. Like, you know, it's so everything's out of my control. I was just the facilitator. She had just lived with us, and then there you go. Here's your baby, and I hope you take good care of her. You know, I mean, it's like literally, I have no idea. And so I think it's probably good for me that it happened right at the beginning so that I could realize, oh my goodness, this is what it's going to be like. And sometimes whenever they would give us a child, they would say like, this child's never going to be adopted. So it doesn't matter what happened. Like for Tia, they were like, oh, if she dies, it doesn't matter. You know, just bring her back, you know. And I was like, oh my word, you know, I cannot even fathom this. But some kids, they would say, like, this baby for sure is going to get adopted. He is going to, like, kids like this always get adopted. And I would be like, he's the same as her. Like, what's the difference? You know, I would never know what would make them have this kind of thoughts. But then I learned some kids' paperwork they put in the system and some they didn't.
Okay.
And there were some real strategic reasons why some kids' paperwork didn't get put in the system. And I always wondered, like, I wonder which person this child belongs to here in the city. You know, like, why is this baby's paperwork not going to go? Because it is illegal to relinquish your rights in China.
Okay.
Your rights cannot be terminated. So the only way to have a baby go into the orphanage would be like complete abandonment, and that they can't find the parents, right? So I know that like way back whenever the one child policy was so severe and they were like, nobody wanted to have a girl, like very severe things were happening at that time. But then as China shifted, I mean, even in our home at foster care, we had all girls and one boy. Whenever I first went there were all these girls with Down syndrome and this one little boy who was literally the prince. He was the king. Everyone loved him. He was so adorable. He is adopted into the most amazing family, and we've been able to go and visit him. And it's so precious. He's so sweet. Still the king of that family. He's so sweet, even with all of his brothers and sisters. But as the tides kind of changed in China, our home switched to almost all boys, and ironically enough, all boys with very much autistic tendencies. Okay. So people started abandoning their children with Down syndrome less. And which was amazing to me. I mean, you could just see it more and more in the community. You know, there would be a child with Down syndrome, which was so beautiful, and a family would realize like it's okay, you know. And even hospitals would say you don't have to terminate, because most of the time, if a mother would go into the hospital, I mean, even when I was pregnant, the very first time I would go in for a prenatal check, the first thing they would ask me, well, are you going to keep it or are you going to terminate it? Like, not like, oh, anything else. Like, not before we're doing any testing. I mean, it's like, don't waste your money on testing if you're going to terminate. And I was like, oh my word. Okay, well, I can't. Okay, we're just going to. I just was so flabbergasted. But I'm just imagining, like, if you have a child and you have any kind of disability, they're like putting you in the termination line. So I learned most kiddos who had any kind of disability that were genetic probably didn't have any prenatal care. So their families came from much different kinds of backgrounds. So yeah, it was just extremely different. And then a lot of birth injuries happened that I learned about later because women are lined up, and if you don't get your C-section enough time, then the baby doesn't have oxygen. Yeah, it's just a lot of things like that. So then they would remove the baby from the mother and take it out and abandon it, and the mother wouldn't have a say. And so even one of the ladies that worked for me, she had come to work for me first, and then eventually a sister came, and then another sister came, and I was like, I can't remember how they were amazing. I was like, I can't remember how you guys ever came to us. Like, what was the first thing? And then one of the sisters said, well, it was because our oldest sister had a baby that they took away because he had special needs, and she never got to see him. Oh. And they just took him out and abandoned him and told her that he was dead. But she always wondered if one of these kids was hers. Oh. So she took care of all of them like that they were hers. She was the best worker. I know, it was so sweet. And I never looked at her the same. I just thought, and she was so faithful. She showed up every day, and she helped our really most severe kids. Oh. Because she was so sweet with them, and I never realized the depth of what that was just on her heart. But anyway, so we would have these foreign families come to pick up their kids, and so sometimes I'd be able to know who they were before they would come, especially once Facebook got really ramped up. Yeah. And then you could find people. And I had to be really careful because I was not supposed to make contact. So just really careful with all those things. But a couple of times, specifically 2 times, I thought that I would have the ability to adopt those kiddos. And the one in particular was a really, really terrible situation. But I learned a lot about the corruption of the system and how they would tell you one thing and something else was happening. And obviously the American family that was coming had zero idea that any of that stuff was going on. They're just thinking they're adopting this child through this really precious Christian organization who's underhandedly doing all these things. And they would get there or be told false things. The one family got there and was told completely different things. And that child, I was so attached to her. I was able to see her a few times once we came back to the States, but when I was pregnant with Julie, I saw her for the last time, and I had such a hard time because she still would call me mama. And even with her other family, her adopted family, I felt so bad for them. I didn't want her to constantly have this pulling, and I just decided, like, it's probably better if I don't see her. I long to see her. Mm-hmm. She's actually on my phone cover. Like, she's my background on my phone. But you can't make the love go away. Yeah. It doesn't stop. And another little boy the family had been told that I was going to run away with him. Okay, this is hilarious. It's hilarious to me, but I had tried to adopt him. I had gone through the whole process. They told me that no one was going to adopt him. He was unadoptable. And I'd had him when he was really, really tiny. And we had been like through a lot of stuff together. And I just had no idea that he had paperwork that was going to get done. And I had been checking with the adoption agency and checking to see if, when it would become available, if I could get it. Unbeknownst to me, he already had a family that had already been locked in with him for months, and he was about to get adopted. And the foster boss came to me and had a special meeting and said, Melodie, the American organization has accused you of saying that you're going to run away with him and take him from the family. And I was like, where are we getting this information? Like, why would I, and lose all my 50 kids that are here with me that I love dearly? Like, no, that's not how this works. And he was like, well, we know that you would never do that, but we're going to have to tell you that you can't be the one to take him to his family. The family doesn't want to see you, and because they're afraid. And oh my goodness, it almost destroyed me. I was like, misunderstood. I felt so misunderstood. Like, how can this happen? And all because I mean, really, it was all because of money, and that's a whole nother story. But um, the I felt so bad for that family. I wanted them so badly to know that I loved their son, and I follow them on Instagram, so I get to see him sometimes. And he's doing great, and I'm happy. I'm so happy that he's doing great.
Yes.
I love him so much. I still have all this love in my heart for him. I will love him forever and ever. But it's weird to talk about it with people who are how in the world can you still love him like that? How did you love him that much whenever he was in your home? And you can't. And maybe if not everybody has that same kind of heart, then maybe
I think it is our heart posture.
Yeah,
it is.
Maybe it is.
But I think also when I talk to the majority of foster parents, it's like that around. It's like that everybody. Even I'll tell you, like my husband, he was like, I don't know if I can really do this. Like I don't know how this is going to work out. Every single child that came through that door, it might have taken a little longer for him to attach, but he was attached and he grieved when they left. And, real tears. My husband that I rarely have ever seen cry, he would really grieve those children just like I would. Maybe mine was a little bit, higher than his, but right. he did. He grieved him just as much as I did. Just looked differently.
That's so good. Did you ever, well, I won't say it this way, but I found myself, especially after the first little girl had left and a bunch of things happened that were so wrong. I just was that kind of like at a crossroads. Like I had a bunch of kids at my house, probably like 24-ish. And I remember thinking like, I have to take care of all these children. And some really like very, very hard traumatic things had happened. And I don't know what to do. Like maybe I just need to be done. Like either I have to end my life or maybe I should end all of our lives. Like I mean like horrible things. And I was like, who am I? What am I thinking? And I need a counselor. Like I need someone to talk to. And previously to that, just the way I had grown up, counseling wasn't really a thing that was ever talked about. And so I actually flew to Thailand. I took a break. I flew to Thailand for 2 weeks and I met with a counselor who was actually like a counselor for like ministry workers overseas. And I mean, she saved my life. She really taught me how to grieve. She taught me how to grieve the babies that had died and also the babies that I wouldn't have anymore in a more healthy way because I was grieving, but I didn't really have good grieving skills. And I don't think I'd learned how to grieve. And it definitely formed me in a way that as I progressed through, that was very early on, as I progressed through different stages of grief, I learned to do it a little bit better, a little bit more healthy. It didn't mean that it didn't take the edge off at all, right? It just gave me a tool. It was a tool for my toolbox that I really needed.
Right.
And so have you ever had to have counseling?
Yes. So I want to say 4 years after we started fostering, we also had just like a very traumatic experience. And we had another foster child in our home. And so I wanted to close our home. I was like, we've got to close our home, but we have this child, and this child is going to be harder to place. They were a teenager and in a program that you had to do special things for, and there wasn't a lot of foster parents in that program. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, we can't close our home, but I ended up going to a counselor. I ended up meeting this man, and he said, I'm a counselor and I would love to counsel you for free because I can tell that you're not okay right now. And I was like, thank you. Because I don't know that I ever would have just sought it out. So with him, I was like, that is the Lord, because I needed it. And so I started doing it weekly, ended up going to him for years, not weekly, but sometimes I would take months break and I say, hey, I need to come see you. He did end up retiring. So I haven't seen him in a while, but he really helped me understand caregiver burnout. The kids that I was caring for were, they had RAD, they had medical problems, they had behavioral issues, cognitive issues. And so I was having caregiver burnout and I was, doing it all. My husband was definitely helping, but he had a full-time job and I'm at home with these kids. And so I'm doing it all by myself. And I wanted to do it and I felt like I should do it. But at the same time, I was not okay. I was like, should I run away? Like, how can we can we move to another city so that we can stop fostering? My husband's like, why don't we just stop fostering? And I'm like, well, no, like, this is still what I'm called to. I just needed a break. But I never ended up actually getting that break. But the counselor helped me understand that it's okay to not put everything on myself, that it's okay to not take another child right away, and that I could just have just the teenager. I mean, I still had all the other children in the house,
Right.
so we still had a full house, but it really helped me just understand grief and loss, and just that there's so much to this process, that it's going to look different with every kid, that it's okay to grieve these losses in different ways. And so, yes, and counseling, it changed my outlook for the last 6 years of our foster care journey. And it really helped me. I felt like I was better the last 6 years because I just understood more internally.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Of course. No, I totally understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just so grateful for counseling overall.
Yeah,
I think
I am too.
For myself, for my kids, for
Yes.
all different kinds of things, and even just being okay with talking openly about it. I mean, I think for so long people just kind of were like, oh, we don't want to say we went to counseling because it's like had some sort of stigmatism, and no way. It's like so life-giving and can be so wonderful for our children and for ourselves.
I agree.
So let's shift a little bit to teenagers, because you mentioned about your teenagers. So I know teenagers are a whole different bag of chips.
Yeah.
Per se, and fostering them. A lot of people I have noticed either they only want to foster teens or primarily don't want to foster teens. You know, it's really hard. It's definitely harder.
Yes.
And whether you have, all the kids I fostered always had disabilities. So fostering teens with disabilities, you know, maneuvering how we talk about when you start your period, and maybe you're nonverbal and you're not able to communicate that. And so we have to figure out creative ways, and creative ways in a system that is like totally unaccepting of you. And so that just, you know, layer after layer after layer. And and then you just have teens who cannot attach at all, right? So teens who might look like they have RAD, reactive attachment disorder, or have a diagnosis of RAD, or maybe some that just look like a complete hot mess, and you know, you're not really sure why all that, you know, comes together. Maybe they have different diagnoses. But how did you maneuver attaching to RAD or adults, teens that don't want to have anything to do with having a mom?
Right. So, you know, adopting and fostering teenagers was never in our plan. That was not something actually, my oldest and I are only 13 years apart. So when I tell you we weren't ready or whatever to foster teenagers, we really were not. Yeah. We did respite for our oldest, and I got a call from her foster mom after we did respite, and they said, would you be interested in adoption? And I was like, no, like we're not doing that. So, and then a few days later we prayed on it, and my husband and I both like came to each other and we were like, we really feel like this child's supposed to be in our family. Like, this doesn't make sense, but we do feel like she's supposed to be in our family. And so I sent a text to the foster mom, and I never heard back. And so I thought, okay, well, I told her no, and I'm pretty sure that's why she just ghosted me. Yeah. And then about a week later, I heard from the caseworker on something completely different, on another child. And I said, hey, I texted the foster mom. Well, it turns out the foster mom's phone had broken that day or something, and she never got the text. And so that's how we kind of went into it. The Lord softened our heart a little bit when we were like, absolutely not. And I'll tell you, when she first came, I think we were all not sure how that dynamic was supposed to look, right? Mm-hmm. I loved her, but I also was like, okay, well, you're 15. And she had a relationship with her biological mom, and she had biological siblings, and she had lived, well, she was 16 when she actually moved in, 15 when we did respite. And so I was like, you've lived 16 years. She's had plenty of moms and dads and her biological mom. And how does this dynamic work? And at first it was a choice. Of course, obviously after that, you love these kids, even if they do crazy stuff that you're like, oh my gosh. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot too, because there were things her being my first teenager, I did not have any other teenagers in the home, not even my biological kids at the time. She would do something and I would be like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Well, now I know, like, well, that's kind of sometimes what teenagers do. And I realized that she was put in so many homes. I can't remember, over like 20 homes. Like she's been in so many homes. But I'm like, did you get moved because you do things that teenagers do? There was a time though when she did leave our house. She did age out with us, decided not to be adopted. She just was like, I don't want to be adopted. I think at the time we were like, well, she doesn't know how to live in a family. As she communicated with us later on, she had 4 siblings in foster care. And she was like, it's not fair that they all have to age out and that I will have a family. And so I do think that there was some self-sabotage. She'll admit that there was some self-sabotage, and we didn't really know how to deal with it. But we were sitting in the car the day after she moved out, and she just said, why did you never put your notice in on me? I was like, because we're family. Even though you weren't adopted, like I'm not just going to put in notice. And I think that took her aback. Everybody had always put in notice for small minor things with her, and she would do sometimes bigger things. We wouldn't put in our notice because she was our family. And then our other teenager, when she came, it was just supposed to be respite, and then the foster family ended up not having her back, and so they were like, can you take her as placement, or we're going to have to put her in a shelter? And we were like, of course, we're not going to put this. She's 17. She's going to age out soon. And with her, we have a very similar personality, her and I. So we would, right away, it was like friends almost. And so we are also close in age. I think we're 15 years apart. And so it was that. So I kind of had like a attachment to her, but also I'm trying to navigate, like, you're almost an adult. Like, we're more like friends than mom and daughter. And so that was hard. But we did end up adopting her 5 days before her 18th birthday. She did end up moving out, and we had a relationship that was kind of off and on for years. And now we have a really great relationship. She lives in my neighborhood in a house. She did move back in for a while. I think sometimes with our kids that have been in the foster care system for a long time, they struggle living in a family setting. And so it's not always the best dynamic, but her being close enough to us and being able to come see us all the time. Like this Friday, I'm going somewhere and I'm like, hey, can you come curl my hair? Because I don't know how to curl my hair. And so she'll come and curl my hair. She brought me her prom dress the other day. I'm like, can I try on your prom dress for something? So we have a great relationship now. And again, like with her, it was more like a friend type of relationship at first, but it also, like, that attachment does have to grow because it's just like a friendship at first.
Yes.
You know, with a baby or with a toddler, you're taking care of them 24/7. That attachment is different. You're almost like thrown into it, forced to do it because you're their sole caregiver. And with the children who are closer to adulthood, you know, they're doing their own thing. You're not having to pour into all of these caregiving things.
Right.
So I think it was a little harder, but I'll say now I love my girls. Like those are my daughters just as much as the others, even though they don't live with us. So it is, maybe it had to grow, but it's there now. It's exactly where I think all the other kids are.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's good and it's okay that it looks different.
Yes.
And I think, I mean, for me, I sort of beat myself up about it. Like, am I treating her differently? Do I talk to her differently? But the fact is, the relationship is different.
Right.
The love isn't different.
Right.
But the relationship is different.
100%.
And I mean, my first daughter that I adopted was on her 14th birthday, her adoption. And I mean, yes, like cognitively, she's much younger than that. But as we've been together, I just remember thinking, like, I just can't wait until she's been with me as long as she hasn't been with me. Like, when can the years start that our relationship goes further than the years that she wasn't in a loving place? And I had fostered her whenever she was 12. So from 12 to 14, you know, she was in my foster care. But whenever she turned 24 this last year, I was like, we've done it. Yeah. We've finally made it to the place, you know? And it's just this weird thing in my head. Nothing changed. There was no miraculous, like, ta-da, you know, we have this relationship that's different. But it definitely was a growth. And it was so hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that it's okay that the attachment wasn't like a baby. The babies were so different. I think it was just like you said, you just care for them and they don't talk back to you and they don't ever say anything bad or mean, you know? It's like they're just so sweet and kind. You can just so fall in love, right? And maybe they haven't attached to you, but for me, it was so much easier to attach to the baby quicker. Whereas for her, it took so long before I realized. Even I just remember one day thinking like, "Oh wow, I love her so much. Like, when did that happen? You know, like when did the shift go from like I am choosing to love you to I can never do without you? Like, you know, you have that place is there.
You are my child.
Yes, you are my child.
Yeah.
I would do the same for you as I would any of my other children. And um, but communication for the teenagers, like how I communicate with my teenagers that came to me later when they weren't little, was and is very different. Like more like factual in our communication because their attachment is different.
Right.
You know,
yes.
and I think it can look from the outside like, oh, well, like do you really love for them the same? Is that the same kind of nature? And I'm like, yes, this is just a different kind.
Right.
They feel differently. We feel it's just different how they're attached. So I can't speak to them. They don't want me to talk to them like I would talk to my little one, you know, or even to my biological child. Like, I mean, one child would be like totally repulsive if I talked to her like that, you know? And so I want to be sensitive to that.
Yes. You got to love them at their comfort level.
Yes, exactly.
That's what both even my two adult daughters love differently. And so I have to love them at their comfort level and how they want to be loved. And they're not going to want to be loved like I'm loving on my 3-year-old, right? They're like, get out of my face.
That's
don't.
Right. Exactly. I think early on, I didn't ever think, oh, how could a group home be a good situation for a child? And as I've grown and learning about attachment and learning about how kids do well in different situations, I think some children who have experienced really hard things in their life, like family life, isn't healthy for them because they feel so triggered. Like the family life was the thing that hurt them the most. And so you put them back in that in a different situation, even a really beautiful, healthy one. And it's like daggers to their heart constantly.
Yeah.
You know, and so they're not even able to have a chance to attach because they're waiting. When are you going to hurt them?
Yes.
When is that next trauma going to come? And to love them well would be to respect that, I feel like. But it doesn't seem right. Like I have still always struggled in my heart. Like, how can it be okay that they be in a situation that looks more like they don't have a mother? How can that be okay? But then it's just me having to change my perspective of what could be good. And, you know, one of my girls that was adopted into a family had some really traumatizing things happen to her. And none of us knew. She didn't say it when she lived in our home. And our home, because we had so many kids and so many apartments, it could appear like a group home because kids were able to be with other kids more, you know, and they did have people, you know, like motherly figures whenever they weren't in my home or like in my apartment, but it was a little bit more free for their hearts to not feel the pressure. You know, I think some kids are so sensitive to the pressure of I'm supposed to love you a certain way, the expectation, right? Even though yes, like I don't put that on you, right? But unintentionally, when a child gets adopted, a family wants the love, right? They want the reciprocation. And so this family is coming and they can't wait to have their daughter that they can't wait to love them. And they get there and then they go home and it's not anything like they imagined. And then the girl, specifically this one situation, she just opened up about some things that had happened. And then they had asked me, like, did you know? I'm like, I had no idea. She'd only been in my home for like 18 months and she was a teenager. And I just was so crushed for her. And being now for them, moving her into a place where she's not in their immediate family environment. And they love her. They go and visit her all the time. She's still a part of their family. You know, they have made a way for her to be a part of their family, but not feel the pressure of you have to live right here. And and it's so beautiful. And I think sometimes thinking outside the box like that has to be part of like you allowing your girls to move out and not feeling like, oh, I'm so rejected. Like, oh, they just don't want me anymore. You know, it can feel like that if we're not thinking what's best for them.
Right.
You know?
I think earlier on in my foster care journey, I would have felt that. But now and towards the end, I was like, this is what's best for them, and this is how we grow our relationship.
Yes.
And it really did. And now, of course, they're 21 and 23, and they are not wanting to move back in with
Right.
mom and dad. But even when they come back, that it's just, which they come back often, you know, like they both live local to me, and so it's just a different dynamic. You know, they're like, I feel like they don't feel like they have to be a certain way or whatever. They're just part of our family, and there's not these rules and, you know, things that they have to follow that they don't want to. They get to follow their own. But again, they're 21 and 23, and they don't want to live with us. They are both got their jobs, got their own places, and they're doing really well. So praying that keeps on.
That's right. That's awesome. So good. Okay, well, let's just try to wrap this up here. If someone would you, after all this time, right? So you've closed your home, you've done all these things. This is the big question that everyone hates to answer, but would you do it again? Would you encourage someone to foster? Would you foster again? Is this something that, you know, what would you say to someone who is thinking like, oh, like still with the starry eyes and the rose-colored glasses?
Yeah.
What would you say?
I would say, first of all, get trauma informed. Because until you're trauma informed, you will not understand these children. You will not understand what they have been through. You will not understand how to react to them. I wish that I would have understood from the beginning that it's not rainbows and unicorns. And we do not want these families to be torn apart. We do not, like, the end goal for foster care is not adoption. That does happen, but that's not what we want. And I wish that at the beginning, I would have known that more. And so I think you have to go into it knowing all of those things and knowing that it's not going to be easy. Now, would I do it again? 100%. Absolutely. My husband and I talk about this all the time because it has made different parts of our lives a lot harder. We say, if we just still had our 2 biological kids, what would our lives look like? And we don't even want to think about it because it may be different in a lot of ways where people are like, well, it'd be easier. But we wouldn't have our kids. And so these are our babies. And so, yes, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Would I do it differently? I don't know, because you just do the best you can do in the moment. And I love these children. I understood trauma, and I became trauma informed so that I could better interact with them, better understand them. I did the best that I felt like I could do with the knowledge that I had. And so would I do 10 years again? Oh, yes, I would. I would do it all over again. But I am glad to be done. I'm glad that chapter in our life is over. Our son is going to turn 18 in a little over a year. And we've talked about, would we ever open our house again? I don't think so. You know, most of our children have disabilities and pretty severe disabilities. And so we just feel like we are exactly where we're supposed to be. Now God can hit us over the head and say, hey, you're going to do this. But otherwise, we're happy with where we are now, and we do not have any plans to do it again. So yes, I would say do it, but you need to go into it with a mindset of knowing that it's not rainbows and unicorns.
Yes. Amen to that.
Yes.
And I would do it over again 100%, but oh my goodness, trauma informed is everything.
Yes.
Understanding what the trauma does to the brain and just understanding that it's okay that it doesn't look the same as other situations, like the stigma of different and parenting differently.
Yes.
Is okay. And parenting every child differently.
Yes.
Is so important.
Yes.
What are their needs? And I just think, trauma informed is really, really. And now we have so many resources. There are so many resources.
There is. And, you know, when we first started taking the classes and everything, so we had a child, he has autism, that's our biological child. And we were like, oh, well, this trauma informed stuff sounds just like how we parent our child with autism. It kind of trauma and autism kind of like had a lot of the same, you know, overlapping. But I don't think that there was enough understanding, enough classes. You can put me in a class for 20 hours, but until I'm actually dealing with the children, I wasn't able to fully understand what trauma was like, what it did to the brain, and how I needed to parent these kids.
Yeah.
And so, but now there are so many more resources. I don't know what training looked like now, but the training did not prepare us. And so I feel like all those additional resources are a must-have.
Yes, yes, for sure. And I do want to say one huge difference that I really didn't talk about, and what you said just made me think about it, is in China, we had no opportunity for reunification. So one reason why we were so pro adoption and that our kids needed to get adopted is because there was no possibility. It was orphanage slash the end is nothing, or get the kids out, get them adopted.
Yeah.
And so with that push, it looks a little bit different. Your heart's longings and desires are different, right? Like,
yeah.
And so there's a little bit of the tug and war of, is it better for this child to be in a family? Is the family prepared for them? All those things.
Yeah.
And is that better than the orphanage? So it was
right. Totally different situation.
Different, right.
Yeah.
The kid is going to have no biological parent, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
So just a different perspective. But
Definitely.
I'm so grateful that here in the States, we have the ability to have reunification.
Yes.
And I will preach it until the cows come home. I'm very pro-life, but I am pro somebody better help those mamas. If you're pro-life and you want to see those babies live, then we have to come around the mamas.
Yes.
And we have to help them. We have to love them. We have to not leave them in the lurch, and we can't just help them till they have the baby.
Right.
We have to help them to know how to be
better
parents.
services for them, and just continue to walk through with them. I 100% agree. I think we could have a lot less removals if we had a community-based support system for these moms.
Yes, I think so too. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Great to chat with you. I think we could chat all day long.
I know.
It's wonderful, but thanks for listening to our podcast today.